Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So happy you could join us with our presentation on what to know before buying a car. I am Phil Porter. I'm a staff attorney at the Department of Consumer Affairs. The department's motto is that our mission is to protect consumers from inequities in the marketplace through advocacy, mediation, enforcement, and education. Education is certainly not the least of these. It is a core component of our mission. And our goal is to make sure that consumers and businesses are aware of their rights and responsibilities under the law. Whether you're a business or a consumer, rights and responsibilities go together. Now, with buying a car, it is often the most expensive purchase a consumer will make outside perhaps of purchasing a home. Lawmakers in the state and federal levels have passed a number of laws dealing with car buying. Now, before we dive in, we have a couple of housekeeping matters. Since you're hearing a presentation from a lawyer at Consumer Affairs, that necessarily means that you're going to have to listen to a disclaimer. I'll try to not read it quite as fast as they read it on the advertisements you hear on the radio. This presentation is not meant to serve as a substitute for reading the various laws discussed, or seeking legal counsel, or otherwise requesting guidance and/or interpretations on the laws from the appropriate party or parties. This presentation merely serves as an introduction and an overview of the material covered. So, what are we going to go through? Here is our roadmap for today. First, I'm going to give you an introduction into the Department of Consumer Affairs and what it can do for consumers and businesses. We're going to give you an idea of things you need to know and consider before you buy. We're going to tell you what you need to know on there are certain, oddly enough, myths about buying cars, and we'll go over them. Next is you need to make a decision on whether you need to lease or buy a vehicle. And there are some considerations you need to take consideration of. Then there are some Department of Consumer Affairs resources that we can put you in touch with throughout this presentation, and that will help you if you need assistance from us. All right, let's talk first about myths. And one of them is the lemon law. Well, is the lemon law a myth? No, not really. There is a lemon law, but a lot of people have wrong ideas on what the lemon law does. First of all, it's limited. It's limited to new private passenger vehicles. That means cars, trucks, vans, or motorcycles that are new. And we'll get into the limited definition of what new means in a moment. In order to qualify as a lemon under the lemon law, the vehicle must have a defect or defects that shows up within the first 12,000 miles or 12 months, whichever comes first, that impairs its use, safety, or will lower its market value substantially. And in order to qualify as a lemon, it must have a defect which the manufacturer cannot or has not been able to repair in a reasonable time. So, I've got a lemon. Sounds like I've got a lemon. I can get a new car, right? Maybe, but check out a little bit further. New has a specific meaning. New means that it's sold by a manufacturer to a dealer. Usually that's by way of what is known as a manufacturer's certificate of origin. And at the dealer, it has never been before titled to another person or company and has been used only for test driving or display. Now, in some cases, if a vehicle is a current year model and it has been used only for so-called program purposes at the dealership, that may still qualify. But you probably, if it's not a car that is, or a vehicle that has been on the dealer's lot as a new vehicle with all of the MSRP and all the other papers on the windshield, you need to know what its background is. But the main thing to remember is if it's ever been titled before, it is not going to qualify under the lemon law, which means even if you buy a car from an individual that it's the same model year in 2024, it's new, but it is not a new car under the definition of the lemon law. Next, any defect cannot be caused by the buyer's modification or by an accident. Obviously, if you alter the vehicle, whether it's negligently or intentionally, and that's the cause of the defect, that doesn't come under the lemon law. Likewise, with an accident, you're supposed to have insurance, and the insurance should be able to compensate you as much as insurance is allowed to do. That's not a lemon law issue. The manufacturer must also be given a reasonable opportunity to repair, as well as a chance to mediate any dispute. There are so-called mechanisms in South Carolina and other states. The Better Business Bureau handles one of them, whereby if there is a dispute that cannot be resolved between the manufacturer and the individual, then they can be mediated before the individual has an opportunity to go to court. And many of them are resolved that way. Bear in mind, however, a lot of people argue first with the dealership. The dealership may well have an agreement with the manufacturer that certain repairs are to be made, but the lemon law applies primarily to the manufacturer. All right, what about if you're buying from an individual? Well, you need to know what you are buying and who you are buying from. Do you know the person? Is the person known to your family, friends, or neighbors? If not, that is certainly not a plus. It doesn't mean necessarily that it's bad. It means you just don't know. You need to research the year, make, and model car that you're dealing with. What you also probably need to do is get the VIN, the vehicle identification number, from the seller, the individual. And there are services that people have all heard of, Carfax and NADA books and so forth. There are services that provide information on history of cars, which includes state registration, recalls and repairs, and so forth. In most cases, that will be a nominal charge even if you only want to check out one car. Of course, you can get a subscription and get information on more cars if you want, but that's a little bit more expensive. But it's worth your while in most cases to make sure you know if there has been a substantial repair made, because that reduces the value of the car that you're going to be buying. Also, it might be interesting to you if, for example, a vehicle was originally titled in, say, New Hampshire. Well, there's nothing wrong with New Hampshire except they get a lot more snow than we do, and sometimes they put salt on the roads to get rid of the snow. Salt causes corrosion. In some cases, the corrosion will be worse from cars that have been up in the northern states. Now, this is less of a problem with later model cars because they've been made by manufacturers to resist, but they may be a factor for you. Read any contract in full. You can get my numbers right. Number 3, read any contract in full and make sure you have a clear title in the seller's name. Make sure there are no liens. If there is a lien, the lien will have to be satisfied before you can get a registration or title, or a salvage history. South Carolina cars will usually have a red tint to the title. If there is a salvage, you need to know if the salvage is water damage or fire damage or collision damage. That car will be worth less, and you should take it into consideration. If the title is from another state, make sure you understand why. If you're buying from a dealer, the first thing to do is confirm the seller is a licensed dealer. And that's not too hard with franchise dealers because they usually advertise on TV, and you will know by passing by the corner lot where they have a large dealership in business. However, some non-franchise dealers will be what is known as curbstoners, which means they don't really have a license. They don't have any history with the Department of Motor Vehicles. Now, the thing about it is dealers would always be bonded in South Carolina for $30,000. Therefore, if you buy a car and if there's some sort of fraud or some sort of dispute about it, there's a bond you can go against rather than having the so-called dealer just disappear. Now, if it's a licensed dealer, the license should be on display in some public area of the dealership. Also, you can go to SCDCA online. It's a long address there, but it's there for you to check. The information you can get on the SCDCA's website will tell you if the dealer has an existing license, if the license has expired, or if the licensee is in business but has been sanctioned by the DMV, as well as the type of license. There are different types of licenses, such as retail or wholesale or auction licenses. If the dealer doesn't have a retail license, it should not be selling you a car retail. That is, if it's a wholesale license only, they should only be selling to other dealers or wholesalers. Here's some tips on buying a used car from a dealer. Several years ago, the FTC issued a rule that requires dealers to disclose in easy-to-read wording a description of the warranties offered, or that there is none. Read it before you sign. You can see on the right there that there is a prototype of the buyer's guide required by the FTC. Now, I'll briefly describe what implied warranties are. In most states, there is a UCC, which requires that there's an implied warranty that goes with every sale by a merchant dealer. However, it is possible to disclaim those warranties. Well, what the FTC did by issuing the rule is to say, we're going to make sure that any disclaimer of warranties is prominent. So these buyer's guides should be on the window, prominently displayed if implied warranties are disclaimed. Also, under the rule, the dealer is required to specify exactly what kind of warranty is going to be attaching to the car. In many cases, there will be no warranty, and here are the magic words: as is, or as is with all faults, or as is where is. That means there is no warranty. That means that the dealer is not making any promise to make any repairs or remedy any situation once the sale is completed. Here's some tips for every situation. Whether the car is new or used, there are some things you need to keep in mind. Test drive the car in various road conditions: curves, stops and goes, acceleration, brake. Look under the hood. Look in the trunk. Make sure you know how much junk there is under the hood of the car. Oral promises are hard to prove. Get them in writing. South Carolina, like most states, adopted the parole evidence rule, and this is something that comes over from England back in pre-revolutionary times. The courts got tired of hearing disputes about what was promised and what was not promised in contract matters. So there was a rule adopted that says basically if it's not in the written contract, the courts are not going to hear it. That doesn't mean if, for example, there's fraud or some other violation of law that it cannot be addressed. But so far as the contract itself, If you don't get it in writing, it is not a promise that you can count on. It's certainly not one that you can get a court to approve in most situations. Do an inspection of the car yourself, but also take it to an independent mechanic, someone that doesn't have any kind of stake in the purchase that you're about to make. Ask to see, once again, ask to see the car maintenance records if the dealer is able, or the individual is able to produce them. If not, certainly consider, as we've said before, going to the various services and learning what you can learn about the history of that vehicle. Scam watch, buying a vehicle online. Well, I'm not going to put up any of the writing below this before I warn you. Buying a vehicle online is in itself probably not the best idea, okay? So think about it carefully. Never wire money via wire transfer service or to someone's bank account. It's like sending cash, and it's almost impossible to get it back. Don't buy something you can't test drive. If the vehicle is in another state, it may be best to wait for a deal closer to home. We had a complaint recently about a gentleman who bought a so-called antique vehicle that from a small dealer in South Carolina that dealt in those things. There was a photograph which perhaps was selectively used, and some representations about the shape that it was in, and it turned out that there was a great deal of rust, undercarriage, and on the parts of the car that were not photographed, and so forth. But this gentleman was on the West Coast, and so if the department's not able to get a satisfactory resolution, he would have to come and sue this dealer across the continent. It's just not the best idea to put yourself in that situation. Look out for a dealer who's unwilling to speak to you by phone and give you kind of an idea whether they're local or not, and whose emails may contain spelling and grammatical errors. Advertisements. Always read the fine print. What exclusions apply? Are they in the advertisement? Do you qualify for any listed rebates or discounts? Once again, if it's not in the contract, don't assume you qualify based on just a sales pitch. Find the promise in the contract. You can ask questions if it seems to be in the contract and is not, but use your judgment, independent judgment, on what you can find in black and white in the contract. Is the advertised price based on you getting financing from a dealer? Many dealers offer financing. However, as a general rule, it's not a bad idea for you, if you're a member of a credit union or you have deposits or other business with a bank, to check with the bank or credit union and see if you can get financing through them. As a general rule, having more choices is going to lead to better results for consumers most of the time. Does the advertisement show a closing fee that will be added to the advertised price? We'll go a little bit more into closing fees in a moment. Note, it is illegal for an advertisement to guarantee the value or range of value for your trade-in. This is another one of those things where if it's not in the contract, it may not be something that can be upheld. And the General Assembly officially made it one of those allegations that cannot be made legally in South Carolina because it's so hard to track down. Also regarding the ads, do all the financing terms work for you? For example, is there something like a balloon payment? Is there, basically, is there a payment that you can afford? make sure they work for you. Also, APRs are important. The higher the APR, the annual percentage rate, the more you'll have to pay, the more difficult it will be to pay. Is the vehicle marked as new or used with the year, make, and model? Certainly, if you thought it was new and is marked as used, you need to understand why. Because, for example, if it's been sold by another individual before and you buy it from a dealer or anyone else, it cannot be a new vehicle under the lemon law. But also, it will probably be worth less when you go to sell it. Beware of the word free. There's less of that these days, but there have certainly been instances in the past where certain dealers would say, for example, our price covers 3 of the tires, but the 4th one we've thrown in for free. When you're paying a substantial price for a vehicle, talking about 1 or 2 items that are being free is it just doesn't make sense. And folks that use that as an inducement, you might want to be careful with them. Closing fees. If a dealer chooses to charge a closing fee, the fee must be first filed with the Department of Consumer Affairs. And as we've said before, you can compare between dealers what those closing fees are going to be in the license lookup. Must be displayed in the dealership, someplace prominently in the public areas of the dealership. It must be disclosed in an advertisement for any specific vehicle and must be shown on the contract. All right, let's talk about guaranteed asset protection. There's not too many people that haven't heard of a situation where when you drive off, particularly a new vehicle from a dealership, you automatically lose some value. It's called depreciation, and it happens with any vehicle. And the older it is, the more it depreciates. But simply by the fact that it has been sold, it depreciates some. What happens to some folks is they end up getting, for example, into a wreck, and there may be some damage or total damage on the vehicle. And when the insurance pays, they find out that they still owe a balance on the loan, and they can't get a new car from the proceeds of the insurance that will completely pay off their obligation. A guaranteed asset protection, which oddly enough is the same acronym as GAP, is a means of ameliorating this particular problem, at least in part. So it is kind of like insurance, but specifically under the law, not considered an insurance product. And it is an option that you can buy that will help you avoid the situation when you're upside down in your loan, meaning you owe more on the car than it is worth. And it will help you out in those situations. It cannot be sold if the loan is for an amount less than $4,000 or a duration less than 12 months. Your vehicle does not qualify for GAP if its specs conflict with limitations of the GAP product. Once again, as with all things, read and understand the coverage, read and understand the documents in your sale. 3, the amount financed is less than 80% of the manufacturer's suggested retail price for a new vehicle or the average retail value for a used vehicle, such as in the National Association of Dealers or the Blue Book. All right, should I lease or should I buy? Well, no particular answer is right for everybody. Before you lease, consider the following. There needs to be an agreed upon value of the vehicle. This will impact your monthly payment amount. What are the upfront costs? things like security deposit, capital cost reduction, which is kind of a fancy word, which is similar to a down payment, taxes, and other fees, they can all add up. What is the length of the lease? For example, will your job require you or may require you to move within a year? Well, you might not want a 3-year lease if that's the case. So how long will you have the car? Consider the following also before leasing. What are the end of lease fees or charges? Will there be hefty fees at the end of the lease term? The law limits the amount to 3 times the average monthly payment. Allowable mileage. What are the charges if you exceed the allowable mileage? Does the allowable mileage comport with what you typically will be the mileage you will typically be driving in a given year? Is there a purchase option? Some leases allow you to purchase the vehicle at the end of the lease, but you need to know for how much, or at least a formula to decide or determine how much, and decide if that's something you want to do before you sign on the lease to begin with. All right, we're going to talk a little bit more about Department of Consumer Affairs resources. Here's another page from our website. You can check into consumer resources and you can get a menu of the various things we do, money and credit, but it also includes dealing with debt, computers, and identity and privacy, housing and mortgages, et cetera, et cetera. You can also look up other matters about ditch the pitch, various come-ons, and so forth, or business lookup, the various things you can look up, either the maximum rate filings for consumer credit by creditors, closing fees, and so forth, or you can stay informed about the department's email updates, brochures, and so forth. Also connect with us on the various online services such as Facebook, X, which is formerly Twitter, or YouTube. We have various presentations on YouTube at the address of youtube.com//SCDCA TV. And now we come to the point where we're dealing with questions. Scott, do we have any questions?
I'm not seeing any in the box at the moment. We can give folks a couple of seconds here to see if they want to have anything that we didn't address that they want to enter. And again, we have that buying a car PDF, which are the slides that Phil has been going over. And we also have the consumer auto guide as well on there. So a lot of things that you may have questions about probably have an answer in that consumer auto guide. A lot of times I know I just purchased a car a few months ago myself, and a lot of the things I had questions about, I could go through in that guide and find a lot of those answers kind of as that process was going. So that's something that's very helpful. If you're going to be in the market for a new car anytime soon, I would recommend downloading that. And again, it's also on our website, consumer.sc.gov as well.
And one of the things I might not have covered too much is if you're buying a car, usually if you buy a car from a dealer, whether it's new or used, there's going to be various things that are posted on the car. You need to be familiar with those things. For new cars, there's going to be the so-called Monroney sticker, which gives you information about what matters are coming in from the manufacturer. They may have what is known as an addendum fee, which is other products or other services that the dealer wants you to buy. You may or may not want those things, and that may be a matter of bargaining with the dealership. The dealership will also need to put on the FTC notices we had mentioned that talks about warranties, what is warranted and what is not. we had to kind of cut off our FTC notice on the slide because of space considerations. But I think, Scott, you mentioned that a copy in its entirety can be found on our website, and certainly if you simply look up the FTC under the FTC's website on used car rule, you can get the full text of that.
And we do have one person asking a question. They say, what about paying cash for a used car? They do not say if it's a used car with the dealership or through an individual, but they're asking about paying cash for a used car.
Probably makes a little bit more sense if it is a dealer, simply because if nothing else, all dealers have that bond. But you need to think about it. I mean, one of the things is, if you finance, there's pluses and minuses. If you pay cash, you don't have any further obligation. But by the same token, if you finance it, particularly if it's dealer financing, or in a lot of situations, even if it's not dealer financing, a loan that is a purchase money loan will be considered under the law subject to claims and defenses against the seller. So if you have a certain amount that still needs to be paid, that might be a little bit more leverage in getting any problems taken care of than you would have if you pay cash and all the money's gone. Also, as we've mentioned, if you're paying cash, certainly to an individual or anyone you don't know anything about, you need to be extra special careful that you know as much about the vehicle as you can, which will include getting the history of that vehicle through one of the services or from the DMV and so forth, and knowing whether or not, knowing as much as you can about the individual who is selling it to you.
Yeah, we have somebody else asking if you can elaborate a little bit more, kind of explain being aware of the word free.
Well, I think the main issue is certain things can be free, but the example I gave is in most sales situations, if you're selling a whole car, okay? Now, there may be some addition that doesn't necessarily come on the car, that it would be less questionable. But if basically someone's telling you that something that's supposed to be on the car anyway is being thrown in free, you're buying a whole car. So it doesn't make sense to describe any particular part of that as being free. It's just an incentive to get you more interested in buying. But certainly whenever the term free is thrown about, that should perk up your ears a little bit. I'm not saying they're all illegitimate. I'm just saying make sure you understand what is free and what is something that you're already paying for.
That looks like it's the last one we have at the moment.
Okay, well, I guess I'll sign off and just tell folks that don't need to tell them again and again, but can't be emphasized enough. If you're buying a vehicle, that's a big purchase. It's not a pack of gum. And so you need to be careful about what you're going to spend your money on, particularly if you don't know the background of the car, or you're going to finance and pay, interest or finance charge on it in addition to the actual price of the car. So be careful in all aspects of it, and make sure you do your homework, and you'll come out better most of the time.